So coming to a close, I've talked about a variety of rather disparate technologies and interventions and things that cities are going around the world. But I was asked to sort of close by thinking about, what sort of things work, what things don't work, what are the sort of lessons that you can draw from that. The big frustration that I have from everywhere that I've seen or worked is that whilst pretty much every city can now point to one thing that is really, really good in terms of its sustainability or energy, a few can point to two. Some can point to 3 or 4 year Stockholms and Copenhagen's and stuff. But virtually nowhere can really claim that they've set a target that is in line with the science on something like climate change, and they've actually got a program that's going to deliver it within the timescale they've set, or indeed get anywhere near it in most cases, because it seems far too difficult. And so the thing that I'm really looking for is a city that will take a really integrated program and genuinely try and deliver it. And we've been trying to do that in the UK with a city in the north called Manchester, who in the central business district of their city, working on the basis that actually if we can, rather than having a whole series of disparate measures that are taking place with different people leading them and different budgets, if we can combine them into one program, then the efficiency savings that we will realise by being, from a technical point of view, by being able to plan that out systematically over a 20-year period, will be so great that it will reduce the costs of the overall project enough to allow us to develop not just the technologies that are already commercially viable, but the ones that we really want to use, but at the moment don't have a business case. So what we've taken here, and that certainly in the UK's case, that requires a public-private partnership, because at the moment the public sector is pretty much on its knees, huge cuts going on, and therefore the capital's got to come from the private sector. So we've designed an offer, effectively, working with a major Japanese trading house who are interested in long-term investments, not bothered that their rate of return is going to be maybe 5-6% rather than their normal 10-15%, but where they know the opportunity is going to be very large and available over a 20-30 year period, where we'll take a whole big chunk of the city, bringing together the major universities, the major hospital, the city council, one of the biggest private sector landlords, going to form a joint venture company together, which will then procure a private sector investor and delivery partner, a consultancy. In this case, it's Arup at the moment, although we'll then go through another competitive process, who will sign up to create a joint company over a period of 20 or 25 years to decarbonise that area of the city. The private sector will be putting up the bulk of the capital. What they get out of it is the right to carry out all the further works without another competitive process, a really exhaustive process, competitive process to get into that joint venture, but then they become a delivery partner of the city. And we will then, we assume, will start to create concessions across different parts of infrastructure. So, for example, a program to retrofit all of the public sector buildings in one go, which there'll be another private sector partner and investor will come in. But the returns from that program, which will be quite substantial, will be rechanneled back into the joint venture, which will allow us then to start investing in things like smart grids, which at the moment would be too expensive to do on a commercial program. Which means through that combination, we'll be able to, that diagram I showed at the start when you're trying to plan out the order in which you do infrastructure changes, we'll be able to carry out the infrastructure changes in the order that makes most technological sense, as well as the order that makes most sort of social and economic sense, rather than the one that's dictated by just doing the thing that is the cheapest and easiest to do first, which unfortunately is the way that most cities around the world, out of necessity, have been approaching the problem of sustainability so far. I also hope that it will give us significant opportunities for community ownership of many of these schemes. So we can see creating perhaps a biomass CHP plant in one of the big residential neighbourhoods where we're able to give a share in the ownership to the tenants of that area, so they have a real stake in how it's developed and indeed become part of the representatives on the board. So, oh dear, I can see I've got 9 seconds, which is going to be rather challenging for 3 slides, maybe 2 minutes. So just to kind of sum up in terms of what are the if there's 2 or 3 things that you really need to make this sort of agenda happen. First thing for me is absolutely leadership, which is not necessarily to say big top-down leadership. There are a small number of political leaders around the world that I've had the fortune to come across, of which Ken for me is the most important, who really have got the guts to take on this big new agenda and push it forward, even when it looks like public opinion won't be with them, and do things that try and change public behaviour, opinion, rather than responding to it. I don't know any other mayor, having said that, other than Ken Livingstone, that would have brought the congestion charge in London in the particular conditions in which he had to do it. It takes a huge amount of bravery. But that leadership is absolutely essential. It might be political, it might be bureaucratic leadership, but without it, I haven't seen any cities that are doing really successful things that don't have very strong leadership. Even if that's the kind of leadership that means the bravery to devolve decisions to communities, not necessarily to be the big I am everything and tell people what to do, but some form of strong leadership. Secondly, that sort of thing that I sort of started with, the old model of cities evolving, and that's a wonderful thing, the way that cities evolve and change. But in the context of needing to very rapidly, completely change the way that our societies function in terms of their energy use, in my mind, there's no way that we can achieve the sort of targets that are necessary on climate change without a large degree of planning. One needs to work out the correct order in which to do infrastructural things so that you're not digging up the same road 3, 4, 5, 6 times, changing things in the buildings 5 or 6 times in order for it to be efficient. That needs a framework, that needs a regulatory framework. The Climate Act in the UK is actually being very good in driving forward change in Britain. For example, in the university sector now, universities cannot get funding for any new infrastructure if they don't demonstrate that they will reduce their emissions by 40% by 2020. They can't build anything new at all. So a regulatory drive has completely changed the priority of the university to make climate change the top. Interestingly, in a city context, however, you now have a very new phenomenon in Britain anyway, where local authorities are asking the government to place new duties on them. So they're asking the government to set what are called local carbon budgets. So each town would be allocated, based on its population and form of industry, etc., a total budget of carbon emissions that it was allowed to permit over a period of time. And if it fails to achieve that target, if it exceeds that target, its grant from the government will be reduced accordingly. In the first years, the other way round, success will bring increased funding. So it's the carrot first and the stick later. But that seems to me somewhat inevitable. But most importantly is how to connect with citizens. If you look through pretty much any city in the world, you can fairly easily see how you can reduce emissions 30 or 40% just by cutting out the wasteful use of energy. And largely that comes down to how individuals behave, whether it's in the workplace or in the home. But incredibly hard to do it. The example on the screen here is from a project we did for the Mayor of Toronto, where we took a very typical suburban area of the city called the Peanut, so called because this sort of strange road design that you can see there before it was built up. We got all of the bureaucratic leaders of the city together who were responsible for that area, along with our engineers, along with the community leaders, spent 2 days together, crammed in, trying to think out ideas about how you could change the city, came up with a plan that would reduce the emissions in that city by about 40%, I think it was. At the end of the day, asked the citizens leader, what did he think? And he said, this is the white-haired guy at the top, he said, this is fantastic. This is the best 2 days I've ever had. It's so good to be asked to be brought into the decision-making process. Absolutely wonderful. We want to be the greenest neighbourhood in Toronto, which he thought, brilliant. And then we asked him, so which are the things do you really want to get, do you want to do out of those things? Oh, I don't want to do any of them. Oh, no, we don't need to do that here. No, we've got this is a wonderful area. We don't want to change anything. And it was, you sort of, your head is in your hands. And that really ultimately is the biggest barrier, I think. And I can't give any answer to it. There's no way to create sustainable cities without very dramatically changing the way that people live. And in developed world cities, particularly in a wonderfully endowed country like this, people have a very high quality of life, enjoy a very wonderful lifestyle, and persuading them that change is necessary and possible without affecting that is extremely difficult. But the only lesson one can draw is that you absolutely have to try. There's absolutely no way in that example in Toronto it would be possible to change that area without getting the citizens on board. At least by engaging them, there's now some possibility. So this is I said the last slide, which sort of shows an example of how you get this. In this case, this is algae production on the side of a building. So I must end there because I've now gone quite a bit over time. I think I was going to say in conclusion pretty much what my former boss Ken Livingston said, which is really annoying. He said exactly what I've been thinking, but it's incredible in the short amount of time I've been here to see what Norway is able to do, given your incredibly benign economic situation and tremendous energy situation in terms of the hydro as well as the oil. It seems to me you've got a real opportunity here to set an example to the whole of the rest of the world, because you can move very, very quickly. You've got everything in place to move to extremely sustainable cities in a very short space of time. I think this is a really exciting initiative, bringing together a number of cities together. Going back to where I started, the C40, the absolutely wonderful thing about the C40 was, for the first time, it got the people in the same sort of jobs in those big cities talking to each other, to the point where you can, the transport advisor in New York knows the transport advisor in Moscow and Paris as a personal friend, and can pick up the phone anytime they've got a problem and ask them how they dealt with that situation, which makes an incredible difference, I think, to the way that those cities can pursue their agendas. So I think if you can do something similar here, that is likely to have a big impact. And who knows also, if you can link up with things like the C40 to bring that international expertise here, but also to sell to them what you've learned here, that will be of great value around the world. So I will stop there. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you today.
Thank you very much, Mark. We were going to have a short question and answer session. Now, I can't imagine what possible questions you might still have after your very engaging and exhaustive talk. You will be around this evening, I believe.
Yes.
So if any of you do have any questions, then please approach Mark. And I'll just say thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mark Watts.